The word quantum itself refers to super, super small
I'm listening to Wendigoon.
talking
Have you
pieces
heard
of
about him?
atoms as they move around. What's interesting
I
about
don't
atoms
know
and
if this video
electromagnetic
will be
fields is that we never know
claimed, but
they're constantly moving, never setting still. So
I'm
what that
listening to
means
Wendigoon
is that
and
we
I'm
always
here to
predict where
form
they'll be or
some
have an idea of the estimation of where they'll be.
spider
Obviously, this is very different
web.
from real world objects,
I have
like
my
the
shears with
view
me.
or a thing at the wall or the Travis Scott vinyl back there, and know for sure that it is there, that it is a tangible object. However, you can't do that with atoms. What's interesting
Let's
is
see
that
what
this
can I
doesn't
do.
just apply to one atom. It applies to two atoms, three, four, etc. So there has to be a point where atoms quit being atoms that are judged quantumly and begin becoming objects that can be judged logically. This goes back to the whole idea of a sand pile, that if you have a heap of sand and you periodically take 1 grain of sand out, it never quits being a heap. But by that logic, by the time you get down to 1 bit of sand, that's still
I
technically
had to light this
unless there's some rule
area
that
someday.
changes it. All this really has to do with thought experiments and theories and things such as. And quantum
I'll
itself is one of
just
these
post this video randomly, lighting up the huge cavern I found around, and see if I could find some spider webs. Oops.
is the idea of you to take a cat and to put it in a box. And inside the box there's a mechanism
What the fuck, man?
would be both dead and alive.
These small ones are the fastest and fighting everyone. Don't forget over here. Okay, what I'm here to do is light up the cavern. Oh fuck! I found something. This has been a treat. Oh, like it was a treat for once. Oh, is there a how much kind obsidian is there? Oh, look at the size of this thing. This part is gonna be fun. Let's see about the chest. Oh, I have some very interesting luck. It's almost dreamlike. What should I do? I know what I have to do. Light the room and find this. Wait a minute. Why was I here? Why did I come this far? Oh my god, this place is huge. Look at the size of that pillar. It might come around my area of digging. It will be a pleasure to dig all of this. Just making sure no one is around, okay? Before applying this. Yes, I can hear some zombies. That place isn't lighted. What the fuck? This place is not even close to lighting up this place. Ignore that healthy piece of mob and look around for what for a place to get out of here. Where did I? Okay, remember 24, 83, 24. 83. Oops. 85. I have a golden apple. I'm not afraid of these white tea bone. Okay, I'll be back for you. Remember the place 95 and 30. Okay, there's a chamber. What the not you. There's a huge. Oh, it is not ending. I won't be able to. I'm not going any far away far. I think I should just return for now. Who did I? I would only have arrived from somewhere it's lit. I think I'm going far. Okay, yes, I remember this place now. Here. Keep looking around and mine whatever I can. Okay, I think it's time to go back. I didn't find any spider web, but I think finding a golden apple is enough. One golden apple for another golden apple. Don't want to fall from it. Yeah.
Standing by the Grand Canyon and standing in front of a sign that says "Head Off Trail." I don't even know if it's worth beginning to analyze that now because it's not going to make sense without context from anything else. The one thing I will say is remember how she said, and at the end of the video we figure out that this person's name is Lauren. So remember how Lauren said we went to find Aunt Maya? I think that was Maya. If you remember, the other time that we heard Maya mentioned was Maya Arnoldson, who was falsely put as a Lincoln looker for 2 weeks. This girl's name at the end is mentioned to be Lauren Arnoldson, so it's reasonable to assume that Aunt Maya Arnoldson is the Maya Arnoldson mentioned in Lincoln Looker. But that may seem confusing. Like, why was she a Lincoln looker and made to sit in the statue? Why did they even put people in the statues? And now why is she the giant floating meatball thing? These are all questions that will be kind of answered near the end. Next up on the docket is Freedom Fowler. I'm sorry, I'm just now kind of realizing, without context going into this has to be a lot of just like the weirdest stuff you've ever heard at once. And in the beginning I said try not to sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist. I'm definitely doing that right now. And I apologize, but this one's going to make it way worse. I will try to help at the end, but I'm so sorry. Freedom Fowler opens with excerpts from a series of exchanges that took place in 1858. What they're discussing is the contracting and construction for the Statue of Freedom. We see in this telegram conversation that an architect says to an engineer, "Freedom must stand on Capitol Dome." The engineer then tells the sculptor that they would like a design for a lady to stand at the top of the Capitol building. After several weeks, the engineer asks the sculptor again if the statue is ready, to which a detective tells that engineer that the sculptor has died and they're sending Freedom on a ship known as the Monarcho. Freedom is the name for the real-world statue that sits on top of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. This is describing the construction of that statue itself. In Part 2's Daughter, we see a story from someone known as Nina Crawford. Nina Crawford is the daughter of the aforementioned sculptor who built the Freedom statue itself. We see that Nina asked her father to make a statue that looks like herself. However, on April 10th, her dad left for the studio and never came home. After Nina's mom goes to look for him, she comes back home and locks herself in the bedroom before investigators and the police come, to which the mom continuously yells she has his eyes to the police. Nina, who overheard that Freedom would be sent on the Monarcho, finds the ship in port and then crawls into the box that is housing the parts of Freedom. Nina says that she can feel her father's presence within the box and around Freedom, and she hopes that she will be shipped to wherever her father is, not understanding her father's fate. She also mentions that Freedom feels alive and, even more eerily, has her father's eyes. Every night she can hear what sounds like Freedom moving in the darkness, until one day Freedom breaks out of the box, grabs Nina, and begins to sprint through the jungle. As Freedom is running, the statue is chopping down trees before it crawls into a very deep cave. We'll explain why later, but it's not just a physical, like the statue of skin. It in some way is taking people's souls or essence. We also there at the end got another mention of the anti-Union administration as the ones who shot down Freedom, and they're going to come back later. But for now, the statue on the top of the Capitol is one of the most terrifying creatures ever. So that's the end of season 1. So season 1 is primarily giving you pieces of the puzzle that are completely separate from each other. Like, all of those, in my opinion, are cool stories in their own right and can serve as some sort of creepy, Lovecraftian idea of horror, but they don't really go further than that. And season 2 is still that, but there's a lot more connecting stuff, not only between its own episodes, but things that make season 1 make a whole lot more sense. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into season 2. The first episode of season 2 is titled May's Movie Maker. I didn't mention it at the time because it wouldn't have made a lot of sense, but in the description of the Canyon Crown video, it says that the video was made on May's Movie Maker. At the beginning, it says that a new computer system known as Popcorn is coming out, made by Maze. We then get a further description of this company known as Maze, when it shows manufacturing plants for the company popped up across the United States from 1960 to 1971. We're then shown another message that says there was a recall of all personal computers and that outbreaks had been reported. It even gives the in other words, what's happening here is the government is trying to get a hold of all personal computers immediately. We then take it down a notch and get a timeline of the company itself. It says that in 1960, Maze Mechanics was founded by Rob Careers and Ron Petrova. Then in 1969, President Dean established something known as the Department of Technology, which united computer corporations together. Furthermore, in 1970, it says that Maze invented the first at-home computer and video camera system. This is all well and good until in 1972 it says that Maze and the Department of Defense partnered to control something known as the True Forces of Mass Destruction, also known as TFMDs. This is the first time in the series we've got a name or real acknowledgement of these giant creatures that inhabit the Earth. We then see something known as Project Horned Serpent, which seems to be a protocol to defend people from these TFMDs. As a matter of fact, the design of the serpent itself seems to match the idea of maze plants making a wave across the country. We then see that in 1980 Maze is attacked, and for one image we see what looks like the special trees or very large variations of them everywhere with lightning shooting out from the trees themselves. It then says that in 1990 the last at-home computer was shut down. So Maze goes from in 1970 being the people who invent the first at-home computer to 20 years later they seem to be leading the front of trying to reclaim all of it. Most likely because of the attack that occurred in 1980. So what it looks like happened is Maze was trying to develop computers and get the forefront of technology, and then they got attacked in 1980 by whatever the special trees are, and then they immediately backtracked and then shut them down. We then see that in 2000 Maze developed the Maze Movie Maker, or a means of at-home editing. So it seems like Maze went from being pro-computer to anti-computer and now back to pro-computer. However, I've got a theory that it's technically not a computer and Maze is kind of like making subversive technology, but we'll talk more on that later. However, we then see a video that was made by Maze Movie Maker that says it's under Maze's factory. Whoever's making the video says that they have to spread the word first and then leave graffiti on this Maze factory that says beware the monuments, they are all connected, and the military-industrial complex grows. So whoever's making this video and is leading this graffiti knows about the monuments, but the graffiti is also drawn in the exact same manner that it was on all of the monuments we saw in Season 1. So we can kind of assume that whoever's making this video is either the same person or at least connected to whoever was leading that graffiti. We then see a diagram of itself that the person is reporting as walking through. They say that the cave is wet and humid and the air feels charged. They then reach out into the second hall to which lightning hits their hand. There's a large explosion and we get the message, do not visit these sites, they have not been fed in years. They get the message at the very end of the video that this was filmed by Maya and Nathaniel Arnold. So now we finally have some stuff to get together. However, this company Maze seems to be part of whatever monstrous secret is concealed. For one, the locations that we see the factories are not inside them, so all of the names just begin running. And eventually the National Guard was tasked with shutting down air raid sirens. However, at each one of these air raid sirens, there was a pile of bodies ramping up to the siren itself because the sirens were so loud that if anyone was that close and spent any amount of time around it, it would cause blood vessels within their body to burst open. President Dean, being hero as always, went out himself and turned off a siren near the White House, which gave him permanent deafness. After all the sirens across the country were turned off, it was such a sight of mass casualties that it says blindfolds were issued to the military to give children so that they could walk children back to their house without them seeing the mass casualties. Dean wanted to go on the air to give a presidential announcement. However, he was so damaged and disfigured from turning off the siren that he decided instead he would use those sirens to transmit his message through and then now is not the time for playing nice, and it's time to get the people who hurt so many, saying, quote, "We have places for them." It then says that hundreds of thousands of people were then reported to the police or arrested by the police in the following weeks, and they were sent to new special prisons that were built conveniently around American monuments like Rushmore and the Washington Monument. And the families of those who were sent say they come back with a much more pleasant demeanor and very friendly. However, they also appear a little bit different. Despite this, people note such a personality change in those who come back from the monument prisons that several people asked to be voluntarily sit there themselves. Okay, so pause. We know that there's these creatures in monuments and people are being fed to them. So it's real convenient that this terrorist attack happens that justifies hundreds of thousands of people being sent to these monuments all across the country at the same time. So that just continues. Not only that, but the families are reporting that they look a little different than whenever they left. Similar to Virginia and her friends whenever the whole Christmas tree zap attack happened. Again, a little weird. Maze, everyone's favorite tech company, decides to begin making hearing implants. The president himself gets one and is so moved by Maze themselves that is why he develops the Department of Technology as a means of uniting technology companies together so they can mass produce these hearing devices. This program goes so well for Maze and the other companies, and mass operations begin taking place across the entire country. Also, it's mentioned at some point androids began giving surgeries. I'm not sure how relevant that is, but I felt like I should probably mention that. That by July the 4th, and remember the attack happened on May the 13th, the United States had completely eradicated deafness, with the mention in the description that people who were already deaf beforehand and didn't want to have the implants in were harassed, and some even ran out of the country. So I'm going to go ahead and say this now, and as with all of this stuff, I'll qualify to make it make more sense later. But Dean is evil. This is getting a bit into the end analysis, but after just telling you all that, I feel like it'd be easier to digest now rather than later. So a group of supposed terrorists somehow hack into the entire nation's siren supply at once and manage to make them go so loud that people literally die from it. And then that is used, like within the week, to shuttle hundreds of thousands of people to these monuments, which, as we heard in May's Movie Maker, need to be fed or they get really, really mad. So now they're overfed with all these people. The people who come back out of them seem to be similar to Virginia and her friends from the Rockefeller tree, in that they've changed their body and personality. Again, we'll look more at the details of that later, but for now, the same thing that was happening to them is happening to these people. And then the next day, after the sirens were hijacked, they magically worked just fine, enough for Dean to deliver his address. And then the deafness itself is used as an excuse for the Department of Technology to be formed and Maze to become a super empire. Which, as we saw again in the Maze Movie Maker video from Maya and Nathaniel, Maze is up to some very shady stuff and have all of these caves underneath their factories in which these creatures are being fed. Or at the very least used to be fed and Maze knows about it. And like, a lot of people who I saw talking about the monument mythos and stuff would say something along the lines of like, yeah, Dean may be a little creepy, but he hasn't really done anything yet. Like, oh my word, yes he has. Honestly, I'm with the Anti-Dean Association, and I think that they're being completely frank. I don't think they're responsible for any of that stuff's going on. I think Dean's doing it as a false flag operation. I think that this is just Operation Northwoods and a history book. And I remember in the beginning where I said I'm not going to try to sound like a conspiracy theorist, and now I've brought up Operation Northwoods, so we're just going to move on. Our next video is titled Starry Sphinx and opens with a video titled BFMD